I'm
Yeah,
here and I
you're
would love to call this meeting of the Budget Committee to order at, where are we now? 10:04. Okay, so first of all, I may have missed it. I just want to make sure, do we have all of I see we have council members here in full. Do we have all the citizens, members of the committee here? Are we missing anybody?
Jeffrey Sunshine let us know that he's listening, but he's on mute.
Okay, great. Oh, that must be Jeff's iPhone. Great. Okay, good. So we've got everybody here and we're ready to go. Staff is here as needed, correct?
I think, yes. Yep. Yes,
Okay,
I'm here.
great.
I
Well,
just don't see.
I see
Sean
at least
or
two of you,
someone.
so, okay, and Nancy. Okay, great. Thanks,
I see
everybody.
Sean in the list, but I don't see her on, my screen.
Sean, I see Sean Coke, yeah. She's
Oh,
there,
okay, it's just
it's not
black.
visible.
Got it.
I'm
Okay.
here. I'm not sure what's going on with my video, but I'm present and accounted for, so
Thank you.
Perfect.
I didn't see the black box there. So,
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. If the camera can work, that's great. It's always an option that people have, but obviously most people like to see each other. That helps us do whatever we can to read the room and the modern equivalent of that, as opposed to being actually seated around a table together. Which,
If I can figure out what it is, I will correct
Sure.
it. So
no problem at all. No problem at all. So this is another in our series of quarterly meetings that Nina and Layla prepare for and we enjoy having. This is a particularly good one for us because I know staff has been well into the throes of the budget preparation for next year, this coming fiscal year. And that, I mean this actually seriously, that always is an exciting time because we're getting ready to understand how the city's resources will match with the desires of staff, with the desires of citizens, with the desires of the I listened to commissioners meeting this morning and I want to call us commissioners, but what I want to say is council of the Manzanita City Council. So we've got a few things to go through today. I'm conscious always when we have a new person on board. So Sean, welcome. I want to say thank you for joining us. We do every year appoint a chair of the budget committee. And by tradition, I'm not sure if it's technically required, but by tradition, this is, at least as far as I've always known, has been a citizen member of the committee. So the first thing we have on the agenda this morning is opening up for discussion and nominations for a chair for this committee for the following year. So I will open it up to members on the video here today and ask if anyone has some thoughts on that matter.
I nominate Chip Quinn.
Okay, so I have one nomination from Kit for Chip, and anybody else?
Thank you, Kit. However, I would like to nominate Joy Nord, and I would really like to decline your thought that I be chair. I think Joy would do a much better job of it.
Okay.
Well, thank you. I accept.
Okay, so I do think we vote on this, correct? Yeah, so thank you, Kit. It's good, and it's good to say what you think, and obviously a person, flattered as they might be, is not required to accept a nomination, so there's many things that go into being a chair, and sometimes that suits people and what they like to do, and sometimes it doesn't, but it's always a compliment to be asked, so that was nice, thank you. So Joy is willing to accept that. Would someone be willing to second the motion that's
I
been made?
second.
Okay, I think Jeff seconded and third. Okay, so I'll ask for votes, and Jeff, you are on the phone. I'm going to ask you to do something verbal if you disagree with the majority or you want to be on record with that. But what I'd like is a vote to nominate and appoint Joy Nord as chair of the Budget Committee for the following year. All in favor? Hand raised.
Aye from Jeff, if you can hear me.
Great, Jeff. We can hear you. That's fine,
Good.
thanks. So that's unanimous. So I want to thank Joy in advance. Okay, we're back on mute. Thank you, Jeff. Joy, it's a really good thing to chair this committee, and it's important public service, particularly when we are in the mode of public meetings, when we're fielding questions and making sure that people are heard. And we just like to run a good meeting, solid meeting when it comes to the city's finances. So thank you for that. It's always interesting to do something for the first time, and I'll speak from my own personal experience with this, especially the first couple meetings in the first year. So you've got staff here to support you. You've got the rest of the committee to support you too. So if there's any point in time where you're, and maybe I'm just projecting my own experience, so you may be far more competent than I at this, but if you have a moment where you're not sure of something or you need clarification, it's always just fine to stop and ask for advice from staff and or any other member of the budget committee. So, okay, so I'm gonna turn this meeting over to Joy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you everyone for the vote. Okay, so I guess we'll get started on the agenda. The next item is the 24-25 third quarter financial review that Nina will present. for
Yes,
us.
thank you, Joy. I just have a couple of slides today. Let's see. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just gonna go over a brief overview of the details of the financial report that I sent out on Friday. Hopefully you all had a chance to take a look at that, and I know it's kind of a higher level view of a lot of those lines, so I try to break it out into the areas that I know folks are usually most interested in. So for the third quarter, which is through March of 2025, in the general fund, revenue from collections is our biggest source of revenue for the city. We had a total of, 1.6. And so that breaks out like this: room tax collections, which is our short-term rental taxes, 1.2. This is again just the portion that goes into the general fund. I have another slide that will show the TLT as well. Franchise fees at 44,000. That's 3%. Business licenses, we've received pretty much all of those for the renewals for this fiscal year. We'll still have a few trickle in, but not a substantial amount. Same thing with short-term rental licenses. This is the majority of what we'll receive for this fiscal year. And then planning, inspection, and tech fees at 86,000. And so then for the short-term rental tax, so we were at 300,146. That includes the TLT and the general fund revenue. So we're up just over 4,000 from last year at this time. We still have one more quarter, which is trickling in now, and we will have by the end of April the rest of that. So we're at 1.5, which this time last year we were at 1.4. So we are tracking a little over where we were last year. So that's great news. Any questions so far on any of that? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Would you please explain what the use of money and property is?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll go over that on my final slide. So use of money and property is the earned interest from the money that's in our LGIP savings account. And I'll
Ina?
show a little more information about that at the end. Did someone else have a
Ina,
question?
can you? Yeah.
Yes.
Can you go back to the next slide that to compare to last year? Yeah, can you stay there for a little bit? It's a
Yeah.
little small. I can't really see very well. So yeah, we doing actually, yep, we ranking pretty good. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
And go ahead.
can you differentiate the income figures for use of money from the category that I see under general fund for loan proceeds? What's that?
Loan proceeds is the money that we're receiving from OBDD for the city hall project. So as we get those invoices, then we submit a return or a disbursement request to OBDD. So that reflects the amount of money that we have received this fiscal year through March for
Okay.
those.
And it looks
Okay.
like this includes the change supplemental budget.
Yes, correct. I did make those changes, even though it didn't go through till April. I thought it would be beneficial for you all to see on this report kind of what those changes look like.
While we're on this subject, I want to ask you that on City Hall, when I go to page 6, the last item, the City Hall expansion capital outlay, because of a supplemental budget, we have increased 436,944. And however here loan proceeds, you increase 100,000 or less. Where's the 100,000 come from?
Are you
The difference.
I can, the $100,000 difference that's, so it's either coming from the fund balance
Yes,
or, yeah,
Fund balance of general fund,
of the City Hall fund.
City Hall fund. Okay, I don't see it here. So you did not present here the City Hall fund?
well, it wouldn't be included as revenue. It's part of the fund balance. So it wouldn't be reflected in this report. I could show you a breakdown of what that looks like.
Okay. Yeah, because I was looking at this, this is actually on the first column, 24-25 adopted budget is the summary of the budget. So I'm trying to balance it out, the in and out of the supplemental budget. So I see one side and then see another side is 100,000 less. That's why I'm asking. You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're
Because, yeah, one in and one out. And then I don't see the $100,000. Is a difference there. So you can, research and let me know. I mean, I don't need the answer right now.
okay. I can circle back to you on that.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, and then revenue from other agencies in the general fund is the police IGA, and that's at 72% is for that. And we've received all of those funds for this fiscal year. State revenue sharing, 19,000, and then just the little bits from the excise tax, which is what we receive a small portion from building permits, and then cigarette tax and liquor tax. And then, professional services. So this is a category that often people are interested in. So, and I forgot to put the total on that. Hang on a second. So it's 262,000 is the total that we've spent through March in professional services. A large chunk of that is the planning services at 84,000, and that reflects the work that we're doing on the comp plan. City attorney is at 53,000, and then just the usual suspects, the auditor at 15,000. That is all that we'll see for this fiscal year. The financial consultant, which is Grand Peaks, our favorite person right now, Bonnie, who's helping us with the budgeting process. And then financial software, which is Cassell, our Hatfield fellow, Cody, whom we already miss so much. We'll have one more payment to him, and then that will close out, and then just IT and miscellaneous. And then finally, just a brief overview on the earned interest. Originally, this fiscal year, we were not going to put earned interest into the City Hall expansion fund, and then through working with the financial consultant, we determined that we should be allocating interest to that fund. So I've gone back through and recalculated everything, and this is how it pans out with that fund earning that interest. We've received a total of 382,000 this fiscal year, and then I just added the rate changes so folks can see how that looks. It is going down, but we're still seeing significant amounts of earned interest compared to past years. Any other questions? Any questions on that? Okay, well, that's all I have.
In determining how to budget for earned interest, what tool are you using? Because it looks like, you know, we're not very good on the current budget on that.
And Layla can maybe speak to that a little bit more, but I know typically we don't budget for this because we can't count on it. And it can vary. It's up to the market. So
Right.
I'll speak more to that.
And I'll cover that a little bit in my presentation, and certainly if members of the committee have any feedback on my proposed approach this year, I would most welcome that. So I'll get to that, Tom. It's a good question.
Thank you.
Well, that's all I have unless anyone has any additional feedback or questions. Chip? Oh, you're muted.
Okay, so what I focused on when I read what you sent was really things that were seemingly well out of balance from the expectation by the third quarter. And not because there's something wrong, but simply I just wonder about an explanation for some of these things that are off. And so I asked about uses of money and property. I think I understand that better now. Under administration and the general fund, materials and services are off. Is that just a timing issue? I mean, they're not coming in at an even pace. They're only coming in at 50% right now.
Yeah, I can probably answer some of that, Chip. A large portion of the professional services line item was for the comprehensive plan. And so I budgeted for the full amount of that work. And for a number of reasons, we haven't gotten as far as, and I probably actually should have only budgeted for about half of that last year. So that's a big reason why that number is coming in a little bit lower. We are sort of heading towards the finish line on the housing ordinance work. And so I'm expecting some pretty substantial invoices prior to the end of the fiscal year. So professional services is likely the largest contributor to that. We also have some line items in there that we will be expending before the end of the fiscal year that relate to capital outlay, and which will be for some certain equipment that will go into new city hall. And I think that's it. But I think the big thing is the comprehensive plan.
Okay, so moving on, I'm assuming on page 2, water utility, other revenue projected 1.2 million. I assume that's the Classic State project. Is that?
Yes.
And do you anticipate getting that in before the end, or is it going to come in? Is this another one of those things where it's going to come in the next budget year?
Yeah, and I'll hit on that a little bit later too, but it's a great question because that applies to both the water utility fund and the transportation fund. Those grant funds were allocated to both of those funds. We are about a month behind where we expected to be. And so we're going out to bid hopefully Thursday. So I'm expecting, and what I'm budgeting for next fiscal year is essentially moving most of that money into the next fiscal year. And I'm anticipating that all of that money will be spent before the end of the calendar year, because substantial completion for Classic Street, we're estimating at this point, is November. So yeah, so those line items that show up in transportation and in water utility are just those grant funds carrying over into the next fiscal year.
So transportation used to be road fund, right?
That's correct. Yes.
And then I also have a question on page 3. Is it the same thing as the water SDC with the expenditures you have still right now? We are, haven't started the project.
That's correct. Yeah, the water SDC also is carrying a portion of that project.
And then the actual for the charges for services and then the use of money and property, the revenue is like way over the budget. Would you explain a little bit on it?
That reflects that we had additional development. So when we are estimating, so for the building fund, for STC funds, it's really challenging for us to estimate revenue because we do our best, but the real estate cycle is what it is. And so it's difficult for us to really accurately estimate it. I was surprised to see that it was so much more than we expected.
Is it
But
any
that's
of
a
them
good
is
thing.
yeah, is it anything of that is a rent payment or is we charge it for the service only rented?
An SDC is a charge that's levied when new development occurs. So if it's a commercial
the-
building or if it's a
Okay.
new home, yeah.
Okay, all right, thanks.
So
Mhm.
Leila, I would presume on this point that this will be another point of discussion as we get into the preparation for the budget, just pace of development, what we've learned from this year, what we're expecting for next. So I'm expecting we should have some good discussion about that as we're looking forward past this year.
Mhm. Yes.
I mean, just one other comment on this before we close out this agenda item. And from what I learned, the budget training, that they're talking about non-departmental is not an appropriate name for an organizational unit. So, but we are using this, so I don't know what's the difference. That's what I learned. Is there any reason why it is okay to use non-departmental as a unit here in our budget?
Yeah, it's a good point. I heard that too in the training, and it's something I've been talking with our financial advisor on. Is thinking of what could potentially be an alternative name for that. So there's nothing wrong with doing it, but I think there is potentially a different way that we could express that. So I'll follow up with her before we finalize the budget. It may be that we just carry forward that name for this fiscal year, but if it is something we can solve prior to
Yeah,
publishing the budget, we can
I'm
do
looking at
that.
last year's budget, the booklet, the non-department items are, like randomly, like maybe something that you cannot put in another any department in particular. So it's come to
That's
here,
right.
it's like
Mhm.
some place that it doesn't fit other places, we just fit it in. So maybe we can do a little better job on the budget to categorize these items.
Yes,
That's my take.
that's a good point. Thank you. Well taken.
Yes, often those nondescript titles raise more questions than not.
Yeah, we try to be really descriptive of what those funds are and the line items themselves, but I don't disagree with you on that. So I'll consult with our government financial
Thank you.
advisor and see
Yeah,
if there's.
just a question and see.
Yeah. No, totally great question.
Do you have any other questions? You ready to move
I'm
on?
done with the question on the third quarter.
All right. So next we'll go over in budget process overview. Leila.
Great, thank you, Chair. So there's actually the next 3 agenda items are all included in my presentation. So we'll cover the rest of the
Okay.
agenda with that. So I'm going to share my screen. Sorry. Hold on a second. Are you seeing the presentation now?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm just getting myself organized so I can see your faces too and see if you like to see your expressions when I talk about things. You're like, and I know to stop. Okay, thanks. So this is the pre-budget meeting, so we're not going to go into any details about the budget. There will be some repetition for some of you. I trust everyone did their budget training this year. I know I got an email from Kit. So thank you for doing that. It's always good to brush up on your skills, especially when we only do this once a year. But I think there are certain things I just kind of want to go over as a way to prepare us for the first budget hearing, which will be on the 29th, and 2 very short weeks from today. And the first is, so the agenda I'll go through is like roles and responsibilities, and then the budget process kind of overview, what the next steps are. And then I like to give folks an orientation to the budgets and the departments and funds. So last year, as many of you probably remember, we did a major reduction in the number of funds that we have, which I think is great. It's best practice. And so we have a new fund structure, and just want to go through that, remind folks kind of how the city is organized departmentally, and then what the funds are that the budget is developed around. And then I want to go over some just sort of projected resources and requirements. So again, this is high level. I'm not allowed to, at this stage, provide you with any details about the proposed budget itself, but generalized statements about revenue and expenditures is appropriate. So for example, the question that was asked about interest, how are we estimating that? Those kinds of things we can discuss right now. So your feedback will be welcomed on all of those. So just as a reminder, what is the role of the budget committee? So your main role really is to review, discuss, make potentially any additions or deletions, and approve the proposed budget that's presented by your local budget officer. And that's me by charter. And then when you complete your deliberations, your job is then to approve the budget to send to city council. And then you also set the tax rate. So this comes up every year. I actually got a couple of emails from committee members acting as citizens, suggesting programs or things that we should be spending money on. While we appreciate those comments from you as a citizen, that is actually not your role as a budget committee member. So your role is not to directly establish or eliminate specific programs or services. You are certainly welcomed and encouraged to ask questions about those, ask questions about the funding that's allocated, to dig deep into any of those items. That's part of your responsibility as a budget committee member. But I prepare, as your budget officer, a budget that reflects sort of the governing body, which is the city council's parameters. So the priorities that are included in the budget are based around those set priorities. But the budget committee also plays a role in facilitating public participation. So while we don't take public comment at the budget, the first two budget meetings, there will be a public hearing. And that is when it's appropriate for the budget committee to receive public comment at that public hearing. The final authority, I think, as you all know, is while you approve a budget, the final authority of that budget approval rests with the governing body, which is the city council in this case. And the governing body does have the ability to make changes after the budget committee has approved the budget. That's happened once since I have been here. And it was related to off-season tourism grants. The city council at that time did not want to allocate those funds. And so we made that change. So it's possible, but ideally we go through a very thorough process. City council is part of the budget committee and is also welcomed, encouraged, and to ask those questions during the budget process. Okay. So this is it's our schedule, which all of you have had for some time. And I just kind of want to go through sort of what the future meetings that will take place, what the content of those meetings will be. So today, you got your third quarter financial review. We're going over the budget process. I'll be giving you an orientation to departments and funds, and then projected resources and requirements, all in preparation for receiving the budget, which you will receive. We're aiming to have that to you next week so that you have hopefully a full week to review that document prior to the first budget meeting, which will be held on April 29th. There you will receive the budget message, which I get to read to you verbatim. It's always a joyful event, I think, for everyone there. And then we will start to go through every fund and department. Last year, we were able to get through the entire budget in one day. That may not be the case. And so we always hold a second day to continue that hearing if needed. We want to make sure that in the budget process that we are thoughtful, thorough, and that we take the time that we need to get questions answered and to address any comments that are raised by the budget committee. So that's our anticipation is to have those meetings on April 29th and potentially April 30th. And then because of notice requirements, we hold a budget the public hearing, which is where you also adopt the revenue sharing as well. So you'll be making those decisions at that meeting, and Nina and I will prepare you, Joy, for all those actions. So you hold a public hearing, you approve revenue sharing, and then you make a decision whether or not to recommend the budget to the city council for approval. City council will hold a final hearing, and again, it's a public hearing for adoption of the budget, where revenue sharing and all the associated resolutions related to the budget are adopted by the governing body. Does anyone have any questions about the schedule? Catherine.
I have a question, not about the schedule. So I really, I'm sure everybody does appreciate your ability to get us materials in advance of the meeting where you're presenting, so we can really have prepped. Do we have an obligation to keep that confidential prior to the public sharing on April 29th, or what's your guidance on that?
We typically share it with the budget committee a week in advance, and then we post it, Nina, right, just a few days. I know there's some limitations, so I apologize. I can't remember off the top of my head what those are.
Correct. Let me look at the budget.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm getting at is in between the time that we hold information because of our duties and our responsibility to prepare well, and the time when it's publicly posted, is it a recommendation that we keep that information then to ourselves and pretty much use it what it's intended for, which is to prepare prior to the public meeting? I'm just looking to make sure we're clear on that.
Yeah, I think, again, I can't remember what we did last year. I think it's okay. Frankly, it's public information once it's posted. So, and once it's shared with you, frankly, and right now. So the budget, but officially the budget, the deliberations, as you all well know, don't take place until the budget message is delivered on the 29th.
And I have on my calendar that the budget will be posted to the website on the 25th, which is the Friday before the meeting.
Yeah, and we, I think our role has been to sort of share that with the budget committee in advance. If there's any issues that come up, we can address those prior to posting it on the city's website. Tom,
And just a note, it's also available at City Hall for folks to come and inspect the hard copy if they want to.
thanks for that.
Yeah, I remember last year it's the same thing that budget committee member received it, ahead of time for us to review.
Sorry, Kit, you cut out there just a little bit.
Oh,
That's what you said.
Make sure I'm not mute. I said I remember last year's the same thing. We received budget committee members received the booklet or the information online ahead. So give us enough time to review before we send to public or publish it. So.
Yes, yeah, and so, we are allowed by law to provide that in advance, but that's right. Typically, we've provided it to the budget committee first, and then we post it within a couple of days.
I do appreciate you give us enough time to look through the booklet.
Yes, our goal is to get it to you
That's
on
helpful.
the 22nd to give you a week.
Yeah, that would be good. That would be helpful. For a weekend, at least we can take a look at it.
Tom.
So, I'm maybe in disagreement with some of my fellow members of this committee, but I don't understand the policy about not disseminating it to the public at the same time you disseminate it to the rest of the committee. I find it helpful for members of the public who might have a different point of view or a more educated eye than I. If they're going to give me some input, I appreciate that. And so I just think it makes a more vibrant public discussion about the adoption of the budget. So
yeah, we're certainly not trying to limit that, and we can post it at the same time that we send that to the budget committee. I do want to say you are operating as a you have to have those deliberations in public, so I would just be mindful of the conversations that you do have. You're certainly welcome to listen to what people have to say, but any discussion that would lead to a decision on the budget, just for full transparency, should be done in a public forum.
I think that's a very important point, and it's one where we have to use our common sense and judgment about listening. I just say this is a matter of timing, because the whole point of how this schedule is set up, and I'm glad I raised this actually, because it's good to be clear, even though it gets a little muddy sometimes in the discussion, but you get to clarity on the other side. So I just say too, Layla and staff have really advanced these deadlines. So if I compare back to 4 years ago, I don't remember getting anything much in advance at all, even as a member of the committee. So little by little, the schedule's been pushed back and accelerated so that there's more time. So I think what we're really just saying, Tom, is there's also a period of time prior to the public posting where the commission, the budget committee members, by reviewing it with a close eye, can give feedback that actually is helpful to staff, so that by the time we're posting it, we've got to the public on the 25th, we've got a complete document. And there have been changes we have made in the last couple of years based on close review of 10 people looking at things versus a couple of people looking at things. So to me, it's, as I'm thinking this out loud, it's almost like we're allowing a review period for the people who are closest to doing the work on this to make sure the budget and the packet is clear and understandable. And if there are things that can be made clearer by our doing a pre-reading of it, getting that information to staff, then that creates a better product, and we're less likely to have to do which we sometimes have to do, which is publish something and then publish a revised thing, which I think is actually more confusing for the public. So I don't think we're talking about holding back information. It's just a question of the timing of it. And again, our role on the budget committee, these meetings, the discussion has to be public discussion, and we, like we always do, have to be careful about listening and know the difference of what's required of us when we're in private conversation with individuals in the community.
Yeah, I agree. I feel that if we're reviewing the budget and people are already asking us questions, it makes it hard to review. I like having it ahead of time before the public, just to give us more time.
Thank you, Mayor. I think you articulated the reasoning better than I did. An example is that you could catch a Scrivener's error in one of the tables. Like, that's what I love about the fastidiousness of all of you in this, is that you look, to us, we do our very best, our level best. We have at least 3 people that review the document in detail before it goes out. But sometimes something gets through. And so it's helpful to have that. And, for the record, someone from the public can make a public records request prior to the posting of it on the 25th. And we would, of course, provide that. So thank you. So I think unless there's any objection to that, I think we'll just stick with the schedule we have, and look forward to getting that out to you and to the world. Excuse me. Okay. So one of the things that just want to kind of reorient people towards is governmental funds. I will say that the budget document itself has been revised substantially this year. There's a lot more supportive narrative in the document, including sort of the definition of funds. This comes up every year. So just to remind folks of what those are, and again, that will be in the document. One of the things that we've been working on with our government financial advisor is to get our budget to become consistent with GFOA budget practices. And so that's a Government Financial Officers Association, and there are specific things that need to be in the budget to get there. So we are taking a big leap this year in doing that. We're not entirely there. Some of the major things that the one kind of major thing that's missing from that is that we would set metrics for each fund. And so that's something I will look forward to talking with the budget committee about over hopefully the next year, is to start to establish that so that we get the Distinguished Budget Award from GFOA. So that's long been a goal of mine since I started here. I took some big steps forward, but with the assistance of Grand Peaks, we've, I think, made a pretty big step forward in that this year. And so just to remind folks, we have several different types of funds. The general fund, which is our primary operating fund, which is used for general services that don't require separate fund accounting. So for example, general fund funds the administration, it funds the police department. All of those different departments that fall within the general fund are accounted for under one umbrella. We have capital project funds, which are for major capital projects. We have, which is City Hall Fund is an example of that. We have special revenue funds. These funds are restricted to specific uses. So an example of that is the building fund or the transportation fund, which receives gas tax, and that's limited to transportation. There are debt service funds. We don't have one of those. Those are typically for capital projects. We are planning to put the long-term debt for City Hall as an expenditure in the general fund. We could set up a separate debt service fund for that, but typically these are reserved for things that are like general obligation bonds, where the money actually has to be kept separately, whereas in the general fund, that isn't the case for the payment of City Hall. And then permanent funds, which we don't have any of those, but I want you to be aware that they exist. So proprietary funds, so again, those are funds that operate similarly to a private sector business, which are also called enterprise funds, and that in our case is the water utility. And then fiduciary funds manage assets that the city holds in trustee. I think we have a court fund, right, Nina, that is where we hold revenue that we then transfer. I could be wrong about that, but we hold those on behalf of external parties. So sometimes a developer will pay us a bond as they build a road, and then we return that money back to them once the road is finished and hand it over to us.
Correct.
Okay, so this is the structure of the City of Manzanita's funds. So in terms of governmental funds, we have the general fund. Special revenue funds include the building fund, the transportation fund, the tourism fund, and the public works reserve fund. The capital project fund, we currently have the City Hall expansion fund and the system development charges fund. And one thing I'll note, since we're here, is that the proposed budget will include the closure of the City Hall expansion fund, since we anticipate completion of that project by the end of this fiscal year. So it's very exciting. And then we have one proprietary fund, which is an enterprise fund, and that is the water utility fund. So those are the budgets that you will see, and then you'll see departmental budgets within that. Tom?
Under the capital projects fund, is the Classic Street loan incorporated in somewhere there, or where's that money?
So that note is not, and there's a reason for that. So that money flows actually into two funds, the transportation fund, and it flows under both the stormwater and street repair and improvements as capital outlay, and the water utility fund. So those are included in those three funds. Two funds, sorry.
Water
Catherine.
utilities
I would
or
just
water
like to-
utilities?
I would just like to clarify, Tom used the word loan. What I think he meant to say was grant.
Grant, yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Little different.
It is different, yes. Kit, did you have a question or comment?
When you say water utilities, do you mean water SDC?
No, although, no. So the water utility, the reason why the funds are going into that is because there's, because the water system development charge fund is its own separate type of fund. So we have the money, the grant money going into the water utility and being expended as capital outlay through that fund. And that was on the guidance of our government financial officer and how to structure it. I had thought about putting it into the water SDC fund, and I was advised to do otherwise. And it makes sense to me, but the money is a little bit split up. And when you get the budget in the capital improvement plan, I'll talk a little bit about that. in a minute, you'll see how the total project costs are divided among the different funds and departments.
So, but the expenditure will come out from water utility fund as well. What we do
Well, the water
transfer.
utility fund itself, so the revenue from the water utility fund will not be allocated. There's no funds that will be allocated from the water utility fund itself to the Classic Street project. The
Mhm.
grant funds will be received as a revenue source in the water utility fund, and that exact amount will be the expenditure in capital outlay for the Classic Street project. We will be spending some SDC funds, System Development Charge funds, for the water utility. Those were budgeted for last year. They won't be expended this year. And the project is costing more than we anticipated. And so that number is actually going to go up a little bit, and I'll present that to you obviously when we see the budget.
Yeah, I'm still really confused about how you have revenue go to, not revenue, the grant go to one fund and the expenditure come out from the other fund. But we will see when we have the budget.
Yeah, hopefully
just
it'll make
still
more
confused
sense.
about-
Yeah.
I just, in my mind now is I don't know how you balance it out within each fund, if that's the case. But we will see. I mean, I'll wait until we see the package.
Okay, yeah, it'll make more sense when you see it. But if you want to look back in the current fiscal year budget, those numbers are going to shift, but it's divided out that way already. And so then we have a formula of how we allocate those to the GL when we get.
Right, I will see when the budget comes in, so.
I have no doubt.
No doubt.
So this is just also, I think, helpful to remind folks of how we are operating. And I do want to be mindful of time. It's 10:55. Are folks okay if we go over a little more? Does anyone need to have a hard stop at 11? All your great questions, so I'm not
Good.
Yeah, I don't want to rush it. So again, we're council manager, form of government. My job is to oversee all the departments in the city. The administration includes accounting and finance, the office of the city recorder, the city manager, human resources. We also oversee staff related to the visitor center. The development services department is responsible for the issuance of building permits, conducting inspections for both building and short-term rentals. They also manage planning and land use and short-term rentals. And the Public Works Department, primarily their responsibility is a water utility, but they also do work on roads, parks, stormwater, tourism facilities. And then public safety is both patrol and code enforcement. I think one of the things that's helpful in looking at this is I actually touch all of these. Maybe with the exception of patrol, because I don't do police work, but I do work with the chief of police and with their staff, but I don't do their jobs. I do have a pretty big role in many of the different items that are listed here. So for example, the water utility, I spent a good amount of my time working on things related specifically to the water utility. I have a big role in planning and land use, as well as short-term rental policy, our tourism facilities. I'm learning more and more about stormwater and certainly our parks and roads to a lesser extent, but still involved in that. My direct reports are the department heads as well as the assistant city recorder. And so they're responsible for the management of their own staff. But those are the folks that I worked most directly with. I think another important thing to note about this slide, and you will see this in last year's budget and you will see it in the coming year's budget, is that our staff, so we refer to them, they're humans, but in accounting terms, they're FTE, which are full-time equivalents. Their time is can be split among many funds. So for example, my my FTE, Nina's FTE is 100% out of the general fund. For example, Scott, who is my development services manager, he oversees the short-term rental program. So 20% of his salary actually comes out of the general fund. And then the other 80% comes out of the building fund, which reflects sort of the breakdown of his FTE. The same with public works. So all of those funds or departments that are listed there support those staff. So the tourism fund pays a portion of their salaries. The parks fund, the parks department, which is a general funded department, also contributes to that. Roads, and then primarily they're paid out of the water utility. So just want to kind of remind folks so that when you look at the budget and you see a 5.5 FTE in a department, it's not that we have half a human, it's just that the way that we divide and allocate people's time to the different funds is reflected in those FTE allocations. Chip.
Description of the split responsibilities has raised a question in my mind regarding STR. Shouldn't any staff activity relating to STRs be paid for by the tourism fund, since it is all tourism? There's nothing to do with, I mean, the revenue, of course, benefits the city, but the regulation relates to tourism. If there were no short-term rentals, there would be no tourism. So they're intimately related. I'm wondering if we have missed something here in failing to allocate more staff time to the tourism fund heretofore.
I appreciate your question and your statements, and I have asked exactly that question. So the law around the administration of our program, which is guided by Ordinance 1003, which establishes basically the how we regulate short-term rentals, is muddy. I will say that prior to my arrival, we did not pay any staff except for the staff that manages the visitor center on contract with TCVA out of the tourism fund. And that has changed largely because of, my efforts to work with TCVA and Orla to get agreement around the staff that it takes to manage facilities. So there are pretty big limits on what we can use that money for. And I have argued successfully that the maintenance of tourist facilities, which include the restrooms, the garbage cans, the dog poop stations, and the parks to an extent, can be paid out of the tourism fund. We also successfully are able to pay for a code enforcement officer position, because the focus of that role is to facilitate tourism to some extent by enforcing and educating community members as well as tourists on their activities in the community. And the argument there is that by having that, we enhance livability here, which therefore also contributes to a safer, better place for people to come and adds to our attractiveness for tourism. So I believe that the way that those funds are currently allocated to those elements of our staff are defensible with respect to the law, but the administration of the program itself is still a bit muddy. But it doesn't mean I have given up, but you won't see me proposing those additions in the coming year. That's a great question. And it was one when I first got here, I asked, and I pushed this as far as I could. I would like to see those numbers increase over time as we do a lot of work to maintain the city in order to allow for a pleasant tourist experience here. All right, on to the next. So this is just to get you oriented with how to read the budget. Again, this is repeat for some of you and some of you not. But this is what it'll look like this year. We always include, and required to by law, the historical actuals for the prior fiscal, the 2 prior fiscal years. So in this case, it'll be 22, 23, and 23, 24. And these figures come directly from our audit and our trial balance that informs the audit. And then one thing we added, I think it was last year, we do have to show what the current adopted budget is, but then you'll also get an insight into our estimated end of year actuals. So again, these are estimates. We have to do our best to read the tea leaves to estimate how much more money we think we'll spend by the end of the year. We've been pretty good on most of this. We tend to be a little more conservative, meaning we might estimate a little more so that we don't overinflate the carryover balance for the following or the current year that you'll be looking at, which is fiscal year 26. And then the line that you all will be focusing on is what is proposed by the budget officer. And that line item will be filled in and will be the focus of our discussion starting on the 29th. And then depending on the outcome of those discussions, if there are any changes or if the budget committee approves as is, that will then be transferred over into the next column, which is approved by the budget committee. That's what the city council will look at when they have their hearing or their first meeting with me. And if they approve what the budget committee has put forward, when we publish the final budget, that will be included here. So adopted by the governing body. So your current budget has this, it's already filled out to the end. But we do this sort of incrementally as we go through the budget process. Okay, so just a few things related to kind of what we're expecting in terms of, I focused here on the general fund, but there are, I have a couple of other, the next slide focuses on some other funds, but we're really in a solid financial position, even as we take on new debt. So that feels really good. And currently, as we just looked at with the financial report, TLT is on par with where we were. We're a little bit ahead of where we were last year, and we'll know more. It's always unfortunate that we don't know exactly before the budget is published, but we feel pretty good about landing very close to what we've seen over the last 2 years. Because of that, and because of some great encouragement and advice from some members of the budget committee, I am proposing to estimate revenue for TLT that's actually closer to the actuals for the last several years. So that's a pretty big departure from when I started, which was this like gross underestimation. And over time, we have incrementally come closer to actuals in terms of revenue. And I have worked very hard with our department heads and my own budgets to estimate expenditures that are also closer to actuals. It's not that it's a policy or approach, but to take that, which is the city's previous approach, which was very conservative underestimation of revenue and overestimation of expenditures with the goal of ending up with a surplus at the end of the year. I think by being closer to actuals on both ends of the spectrum, we are able to more effectively address any shifts in the economy or in revenue sources. So this is I feel pretty good about this. And so I want to thank Kit actually for her advice and guidance over the last couple of years on this, that I feel more confident putting
You're
a number
welcome.
forward. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. That-
You did good. I see a lot of improvements.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, and that's, I think, the lovely thing about having such a well-rounded and thoughtful group of people is that advice and guidance is heeded, and it helps us do a better budget. So thank you for that. There is potential for a modest increase in transient lodging tax if the county's ballot initiative passes, but I did not account for that because it's an unknown. And so if that does indeed pass, that will explain any kind of delta that we see, and we'll plan for that for next year. But it is an unknown, and the budget will be through this body by the time that measure is voted on. We also have a new recommended short-term rental policy. It's going to take us some time to implement that policy. I'm not sure if or how that will affect revenue, but that's something we'll be watching very carefully. We may not know enough throughout this fiscal year to make informed estimates for fiscal year 27, but I just want to note that. And then the other thing I'm planning to do, and this came up a bit earlier, is that we usually estimate these kind of very conservative estimates for interest. I feel like the trends that we've seen over the last couple of years, and even though we're trending down and we're in a bit of an uncertain economy, they've been too low. And so what I am proposing for this year, I still think is conservative, is that I'm going to estimate about 50% of what we estimate for this current fiscal year. So whatever we receive. So if the general fund, I think we are currently at $130,000, Nina. So we'll estimate about half of that in interest for next fiscal year. So again, just trying to get a little closer to actuals. That's also related to the fact that we just have a higher fund balance in both the general fund. We're starting to see some uptick finally in the water utility fund, and that benefits the city in terms of, we just have more money in savings, and so we're earning more on that. Does anybody have any thoughts, questions, concerns, or comments? Sean?
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was one of the observations I had, was that we have more money in the account so that it's gaining a lot more interest than we had in the past. Plus,
Yeah.
interest rates the last year and a half have been dramatically different than they were for the large period, leading up to that. So I could see where this is going to be an especially difficult thing to estimate, because much of this is out of your, certainly the interest rates are out of your control. But I didn't know if that GLIP fund, if they have any guidance that they issue periodically or what, because I could see with a dramatic change in interest rates there, something you projected 6 months or more in the past would be wildly off. So I just didn't know if they could provide any, say, monthly or quarterly guidance on where they expect their rates to go.
Yeah, I don't believe so, but Nina, do you have anything you might want to add to that?
They report changes monthly, but they don't report any projections, to my knowledge.
We can dive into that a little deeper, but that's my understanding too. So, but it's a good point. Joy.
So with the potential for the TLT increase, if the ballot measure passes, will we be able to do a supplemental budget to add if we decide to move ahead with an increase for Manzanita?
So we will not need to do a supplemental because it's related to revenue. So we'll just see more revenue. And that will be a decision City Council will need to make if the ballot measure passes, whether or not they want to increase our local tax. So what we will see is just higher revenue. Now, if they wanted to spend that and that exceeds whatever the final appropriation is by 10%, then we would do a supplemental budget. But it's okay for us to have more money. We just can't spend more money than is appropriated. But it's a good question and a good clarification. But that's where I'm just getting ahead of it, Kit. So if we have more money, it's because the measure passed and I did my best. Okay.
So, the interest, uh, the interest rate, what in the past, what I did to project is to look at prime rate from the Federal Reserve and then anticipate it. Usually it won't go up and down too much. It will gradually increase. And then you can tell from the, news from the Federal Reserve, it go with it. So it's a kind of pretty good signal to us how the interest rate go higher or lower. So that's what I used to do, look at it. But corporate accounting is different from the governmental accounting. So it's good to be conservative, but no need to be very conservative because you kind of know that it will be higher than $7,000, $10,000 like that. I would say maybe take, like your approach type, for now, take 50% of what the current rate is appropriate, is more than appropriate.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Just builds my confidence in that approach. And so will help explain those numbers when you receive them next week. So thanks.
Yeah, if next year you still have a lot, more than we budget, we can raise the percentage to 70% gradually. As conservative is our goal. We don't want to overestimate the revenue and underestimate the expenditure. That's the goal.
That's right. Thank you. Yeah, and I would agree with that. As we try. Yes. Okay. So the water utility, first time I've been here, is in a solid financial position, and so we have a sufficient reserve. And I think for those of you that reviewed the audit, that was really great news. Just for context, the first year that I was here and did the budget, we had about 100,000 in the budget, from a budget standpoint, in unappropriated fund balance. And so we're far and away from that, and that is really important for us in terms of maintaining the resiliency of our water system. The City Council did vote when they adopted the master fee schedule to adjust water rates based on inflation. The building fund also raised fees as part of that master fee schedule. And they, one of the things we're proposing as part of this year's budget, we had an FTE already in the building department that was half permit tech, half planning tech. We didn't fill that position last year, but we have, and I have through this budget, proposed filling that position this year due to workload. The transportation fund, even with these capital projects, largely due to some leftover from the Dorcas Street project, which was a transfer from the general fund, has sufficient reserve this year, but it is, and I say this every year, so I'm sorry for being a broken record, but I feel like it's my responsibility that it's not sustainable. The revenue that's generated through franchise fees, gas tax, and are not sufficient to cover the operations of the road system, let alone the maintenance that's required. So that means that the general fund has to subsidize those costs. And if that trend continues, that starts to eat into the general fund's reserve balance, and that can have that can be problematic. And again, right now we're in a good financial solid position, But I do think it's important that we acknowledge and recognize that the transportation fund does operate at a deficit. It also limits what we can do in terms of road maintenance and repair. The grant funds for the Classic Street Connection project and the grant funds for the housing code work will likely carry over into fiscal year 26. So we received $78,000 from DLCD to finish the housing code work. We are on track to meet our deadline, but I am not anticipating that we will get the funds from DLCD this fiscal year. So I have budgeted to account for that. We will pay those funds out, but likely we won't receive them, just given the complexity and the time it takes to receive those funds back from DLCD. I will say that, and Nina can either confirm or deny this, but OBDD has been a pleasure to work with, both in terms of the loan process as well as I believe we did our first reimbursement for the grant, just a very straightforward, and they're very quick about paying us back. There is potential that some of the revenue that we've estimated to receive from the loan proceeds for this fiscal year 25 may end up coming in fiscal year 26. So I'll mention that again during the budget process, but we're expecting, so substantial completion for City Hall is May 16. We expect the building to be turned over to us June 2nd and get our final bill. And we're hopeful we will receive the reimbursement. Nina's super quick on the reimbursement request by the end of June, but if not, that money will show up in the general fund next fiscal year. So the audit will show that we ended up with less revenue than we expected, but it will correct itself in the following fiscal year. So just want to give you a heads up that that is a potential, but we feel pretty good about that given the turnaround time and Nina's quick and responsive requests for reimbursement. And finally, we still are awaiting confirmation that the grant funds for the Classic Street project will be carried over by the state. That's part of OBDD's budget process, which is not yet complete, but we have a high level of confidence that that will happen. But I never feel comfortable until that's completely finished. So just wanted to give folks a heads up on that. Catherine.
Question on timing, is the OBDD, so Oregon Business
Development Department, sorry for the, yeah.
Oh,
acronym.
thank you, because I want to do that. So that's the government, Oregon government agency we've been working with to provide the funding for the funding source, basically, for the city hall. Are they on the same budget schedule as the state, or so is the timing for that going to be the same as the state setting of the budget, or is it different?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So we'll know by by sine die, we'll know by the end of the legislative session whether or not that has passed. And just so folks know that when we receive the grant, they can only allocate, it's just like us, they can only allocate it for the budget years that they have. So we received the grant, I think sometime in June or July. We didn't get contract documents until October. And then we were supposed to be done with the project by June. And we hadn't even started design. And so we have fast tracked the design. And like I said, we're hoping to go out to bid on Thursday, and then substantial completion we're anticipating to happen in November. So construction will likely start early June because we have to go through a review process and then have council will ultimately be the ones that approve the contract. So hope is by then that process will be done. But I'd just like to be transparent and let folks know that that's happening. And okay, almost there, guys. Thanks for sticking with me. So expenditures, we'll see a little drop in professional services this year. That's because we, again, the grant funds that we received from DLCD will help offset the cost for some of the comprehensive plan. We've already paid out a bit of a comprehensive plan. The only other two major projects that I am planning for is the municipal code, and then we also do a salary survey every 4 years, and so this is the year that that will occur. I proposed, council approved a position that was going to be filled by Cody Aucoin, and for reasons that were good, he ultimately declined that offer, and so that position is open, and as soon as I have time, I will post it and hopefully recruit somebody for that. But that will be included in the administration's budget, and that is an increase in FTE over last year. Some of the costs in the M&S, so the materials and services for City Hall, we just had to guess. So there's uncertainty in terms of how much it's going to cost for electricity for that building in particular. It actually may be less because we have solar, but we also have old buildings to maintain. So you'll see that number might look a little high. We also ended up consolidating electrical costs. So right now, if you look at the city's budget, police and the city hall pay electricity bills. Those are now all combined because we're all combined. So just so you know, when you see that number, you're like, whoa, that I will explain that to you when we go through the budget process. That number will be different, and it really is an educated best guess. And so we'll refine that number in the coming years once we see how well the solar performs and what the costs are to maintain and keep the existing buildings in decent shape until the city council decides what to do with those. Our major capital project this year will be the Classic Street connection. That's an enormous project, almost the same size as and cost as City Hall. So that's a big project, and I feel really good about that, but it'll be done a bit quicker, and we're hopeful that that'll be completed by November. Our focus this year is maintenance and resilience projects. So there's actually a handful of projects that our new Public Works Director, Rick, will be completing this current fiscal year. The capital improvement plan is actually only going to focus on projects we are proposing for next year. And I know that's a departure. A CIP is typically a 5-year look. I am planning to spend this year, fiscal year 26, working with our new Public Works Director to build a capital improvement plan that reflects both the priorities of the City Council. So one of the things that Council has asked to do this year is to do some strategic planning. And I think with a new Public Works Director in place, it's important for he and I to both sit down and really look at what projects can be completed. We'll also have a much better sense after this year's audit of how much funding we have available in the water utility for maintenance projects. So we want to maintain a healthy reserve in that fund, and then that will give us a sense of what resources we have. So just wanted to give you guys a heads up that you'll probably see, I think there are 5 capital projects that we're proposing for next year, and they are mainly resilience and maintenance projects that I personally think are long overdue. And I want to give credit to Rick, who has just done a tremendous job in enhancing, again, the resiliency of our water system. We have a couple of projects that are currently underway that we're very excited about to get completed. So that includes installing a new pump system out at the well site that's been on the books for years, and we're executing on that right now. So that's really exciting. Does anyone have any questions about any of these items I brought up? And that's just kind of high level. I'll get into the details when, again, we go through the budget itself. But those are the kind of major changes. I guess the last thing I did want to mention, I don't know if I explicitly mentioned it before, but the budget does include a promotion of our code enforcement officer to a fully sworn police officer position. He will still focus on code enforcement, but he will be going through the academy and going through the certification process. That will provide additional resilience again for our police department and will allow him a broader range of ability to respond to all calls. Some calls he's not able to do so at this time. And given his education and background, he has a bachelor's degree in administrative justice, and his performance over the last year and a half, this seemed like the natural progression and next step. The majority of that position will still be funded through the tourism fund as well. But I feel very strongly about that shift, and that will also provide some relief to our police department in terms of on call when folks are on vacation in particular, or in particular when they're sick. So I think it's really important. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. Looks like none of you are asleep, so that's great. I think that's it, yeah. And appreciate your time and attention. And hopefully this will help prepare you for our budget meeting in 2 weeks.
See you guys in 2 weeks then.
May I, just one comment? I always like to talk about capital projects and long-range planning. So we'll have more discussion about this. Is, not time for details on it now, but I appreciate the way you laid out the progression on this. This is really important. It's really important work. And in the time I've served on budget committee and then council, and then as continued part of council as mayor, I've sometimes been impatient for sooner, more sooner. But what I have seen, and I think we'll still continue to see this year, is some very steady progress against some goals that are big and are going to include some projects that are significant for the city. We have small resiliency projects and then we have big resiliency projects. My favorite example of that is our 3 water tanks. So there's a lot for the city for the sake of infrastructure and safety and resilience that we have to consider. And it will take a good bit of time to sort out what can be done, what the priorities are, and how we will fund those things. But I really appreciate and like the way that you've described the way that our new public works director has come in, and we'll get to see some nice evidence of good progress that I think we can hopefully make very visible to the public, even though they don't see it. This is one of the challenges, public works, and I know we're going to make even more progress on that this year, of just, hey, you may not realize it, you won't ever see it, but this has gone on and this matters to you. And so continuing to build that and the reputation of the department and the feeling of safety and security that we want people to have about all these things is very important. So I want to thank you for the work, thank Rick and the team for the work on that, and also his predecessor who helped get many of these things in place in the last several years. So I'm looking forward to the progress on that and how that reflects in the budget. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I do want to say I did do all of Public Works' budgets this year, but Rick was really engaged deeply in those and the establishment of the capital outlay in particular, and will over time assume the role of making those budgets himself. And he's done his pickup is super quick. So if I look a little extra tired, it's just I did a few more budgets this year than I'm used to, but it worked out great, and it's been a wonderful learning experience, I think, for both of us. And yeah, so that's why you'll see me presenting the water utility budget and other budgets this year, just as a heads up. Great. Okay, I think with that, so we will get you the budget next week. It's totally appropriate to reach out to staff if you have any questions, comments, you find something wrong, please let us know ahead of time, and so that we can address any of those. If there are any specific or detailed questions that you want answered, we're at your service to do that. I just would ask you copy both Nina and I. She's my second brain right now, or maybe first, really. Just to make sure that we're able to be responsive to you and get some of those questions addressed if you have them ahead of the meeting. Of course, not deliberations necessarily, but if you just need a little extra explanation, please don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Okay, anyone else have any questions? Okay, well, with that, I'll adjourn the meeting at 11:33.
Thank you.
Thank
Right.
you.
Joy.
Bye, everyone.